Hello, my name is Sarah DeCataldo. I am a volunteer with Pride in Aging Rhode Island, which supports LGBTQ older adults. And I'm here today to talk to you all about how abuse impacts LGBTQ older adults. Great. So today we're going to talk about how abuse impacts our LGBTQ older adults and how you as providers and service folks can help support LGBTQ older adults who experience abuse or who interact with you. So before we get kind of deep into how elders who identify as LGBTQ experience abuse, let's create a little bit of a foundation for us to understand and make sure that we're all on the same page with proper terms. So what does LGBTQ plus mean? It's not just alphabet soup. LGBTQ plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and plus, which means there's so many other identities that are represented in the LGBTQ community. And that plus sign makes sure that we are inclusive of other folks, including those who may identify as pansexual, who may identify as non-binary, all of which we're going to be talking about today. So LGBTQ also encompasses these four overarching categories: sexual orientation, gender identity, sex, and then your sex assigned at birth. Sexual orientation refers to who you're attracted to, who you want to go out on a date with, who you want to become romantically involved with. Gender identity is how you feel you are or who you feel you are. Some folks identify as male, some folks identify as female, but there's also other gender identities. There are some folks who identify as non-binary, meaning they don't feel as though they're male or female, they are a person. And we also have folks who are gender fluid, and these are folks who identify across the spectrum of gender. And they feel connected to both masculine attributes as well as feminine attributes and human attributes. The difference between gender identity and sex is that your gender identity is who you believe you are and how you want to present yourself in the world. Sex refers to biologically what sex organs you or someone may have. Sex assigned at birth is how the doctor or the gender that the doctor assigned to you at your birth. We know that when babies are born and they have a vagina, they are told that they are a girl. And when boys are born and they are have a penis, they are told that they are a boy. What we don't know is internally and biologically what other factors may come into play with folks' biology. Just because someone externally has a penis or externally has a vagina doesn't necessarily mean that genetically speaking, they are 100% female or 100% male. Throughout society, we have instilled norms, misconceptions, biases, and different expectations associated with individuals who have a penis and individuals who have a vagina. We do know that for some folks, maybe externally they may have a vagina, but internally they may have testicles, or someone may have a combination of chromosomes or different hormone levels. We don't necessarily know the true biological sex of someone when they're born, but we assign a sex to them based on the external genitalia. So I know I've talked a lot about private parts, but let's go a little bit deeper into why sex and gender is actually not the same thing. Sex refers to those organs, where gender is how we want to present. In our society, we've combined the two, and we have associated what it means to be male for individuals who have a penis and what it means to be female for individuals who have a vagina. And this is a recorded webinar, so we're not going to go back and forth, but think to yourself, how have you been told or taught about what it means to be male in our society and what it means to be female? Or thinking about when a loved one or a friend or a family member says, I'm pregnant, and you find out that they're having a girl. What are some of the presents that you buy them? What are some of the toys that folks give? Same thing. Someone says they're having a boy, right? When we think of girls, we think of the color pink and dresses and ballet. And when we think of boys, we think of blue and trucks and, strong and not crying. These are all categories that we've assigned as a society. And I think one of the best ways to kind of explain this is, how many of you have pets? If you have a girl dog or a boy dog, we actually don't know how dogs identify their gender, but we assign it on them by getting our boy dogs blue collars and getting our girl dogs pink collars. And when you think about dogs, they both act the same. There's really no difference between boy dogs and girl dogs. They both play, they both run, they both catch. There's no difference except for those external sex organs. We're the ones as humans that have assigned those gender norms and gender stereotypes, such as a pink collar and a blue collar. So it's no different than people. When folks are born, we may have to assign a sex at birth, but we should allow folks to explore who they are throughout their lifetime. And so, for folks who may identify as trans, these are folks whose their sex that was assigned to them at birth does not fit who they feel that they are on the inside or on the outside. So if someone was born with a penis, they were told they were a boy, they were educated as a boy throughout society and throughout their life. But for trans folks, that person may wake up and look at themselves in the mirror and say, okay, I have this penis, I'm dressed like a man, but it just doesn't feel right. It's not who I am. And so we want to allow folks to express themselves and be who they truly feel that they are. And so when we talk about these four categories, they're not black and white. I think throughout history, we've tried to put people or force people into boxes or in either or black and white. But with sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexuality, we have a continuum. It's not either or, it's across a whole entire spectrum of opportunities. And so when we look at sex, yes, on one end of the spectrum, those who may have a penis and testicles and certain chromosomes may be male. And same thing with those who are female. If they have a vagina and certain chromosomes and ovaries and a uterus, they're identified as female. But for those folks who may have a vagina and testicles or different hormonal or chromosomal characteristics, those folks are intersex, which means they're not either or, they have representations of both of those sexes. Then we have gender identity. And for throughout all of our history, we've associated gender with sex and saying that you are either a man or you are either a woman. But for gender identity, it's fluid. And so though you may have some individuals that adhere to those strict gender norms, view themselves as a man, and kind of follow those stereotypical or what we view as stereotypical characteristics of being a man. Same thing with being a woman. But for those folks who may feel as though they have characteristics of masculinity as well as femininity, or for those people who feel as though, you know what, there's some characteristics of maleness and femaleness, but I'm just a person and I believe that I walk through life as who I am, those are folks who may fall in the middle of the continuum, who may identify as either non-binary, and non-binary is someone who doesn't identify as male or female, they identify as a person, or you may have someone who identifies as gender fluid, which means they have representations of all different types of identities and they view themselves as human with both masculine, feminine, and non-binary characteristics and qualities. Now we move down to gender expression, which is how we present ourselves in the world. And again, this is along a continuum. And for any of you that's watching this webinar, I guarantee you go along this gender expression continuum throughout the day, never mind just in your lifetime. So for me, if you saw me this morning before I jumped in the shower in my sweatpants and t-shirt and, sweatshirt and baseball cap, my gender expression was probably more masculine. But now I'm wearing boots with heels and I put a little bit of lipstick on today for this recording, although you can't tell. But I'm presenting more as feminine. Then there's folks who just dress as themselves and maybe wear pants and loafers and sneakers and a sweater, and it's not necessarily masculine or feminine. It's androgynous, or someone who just dresses kind of in the middle, or dresses comfortably, or dresses as in a style that fits who they are. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are dressing masculine or male. They are just dressing as who they are. We're the ones who have assigned those qualities with the certain outfits, such as heels or makeup or dresses. And then our final continuum is sexual orientation. We have folks who may be attracted to women on one end of the spectrum, and then folks who might be attracted to men on the other end of the spectrum. But there's so many more different sexual orientations along this continuum. I identify as a lesbian, which means that I am sexually attracted to women. And so I fall on the kind of one end of the spectrum. But before I came out and when I was in high school and I had lots of relationships with guys, I was at the other end of the spectrum. And for folks who might be bisexual, which means they are sexually attracted to both men and women, or individuals who are pansexual, which means they are sexually attracted to people, regardless of how they identify, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex assigned at birth, they are attracted to the person. And so instead of forcing people into blocks, we allow them to fall along this continuum in a way that feels good and right for them. So when we're talking about LGBTQ seniors, who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about everybody. Just like we talk about any survivor of abuse or any community member, right? We have LGBTQ seniors who are women, who are men, who are non-binary, who are gender fluid. Maybe they're gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, or asexual. Asexual is someone who's not romantically attracted to anyone. And just as we have seniors and older adults who are frail, we also have lots of seniors and older adults who are active. We have LGBTQ older adults who might be dating, who maybe are married, who might be widowed or singled. Maybe they're employed, maybe they're unemployed, maybe they're retired, maybe they are veterans. Maybe they volunteer in our community, advocate for policy change, nonprofit professionals, caregivers, caretakers. Our LGBTQ senior citizens play lots of different roles in our community, just like all of you do as well. And so when we try and force people into a box of, oh, you're LGBTQ and you're a senior, we don't give them the opportunity to truly be who they are and to walk through the community and walk through the world in a way that feels best and safest for them. There's also lots of diversity within the LGBTQ community and older adults. We have all different races, ethnicities, religious affiliations, socioeconomic statuses, languages, abilities. But the one thing that many of our older LGBTQ folks experience is ageism. There is ageism in our society against older adults. And within the LGBTQ community, there is ageism against our LGBTQ older adults. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history and why some of that ageism may exist. And it's important for us to remember that our LGBTQ seniors today, who are 60 and above, are the ones who fought for our rights, for LGBTQ folks today, who fought for people to pay attention to the AIDS epidemic in the 1990s, who advocated for hate crime legislation after the brutal killing of Matthew Shepard, who advocated for the reversal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military, and who advocated for marriage equality and the ability for anyone to get married to who they love. That history also plays an important role in how our older LGBTQ folks walk through the world. Many of our folks have experienced some of our society's worst impacts and worst treatment against the LGBTQ community. For many of us who have maybe become professionals in the past 20 or 30 years, or even 10, 15 years, we live in a world where being gay or being trans at this point is not illegal. But in the 1940s and 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was very, very different. As an example, we had the Lavender Scare in the 1950s with McCarthy and anti-communism. There was a big, big push for anti-communism within our community. And anyone who was viewed as different or as other during that time was associated with the word communism. And there was a big drive to eliminate communism from our society and from our communities, which meant that many people were fired from their employment, were arrested and charged with crimes that they didn't necessarily commit, all in the name to keep our country safe. The Lavender Scare specifically fired thousands of federal and government employees who the government suspected was being gay. Because if you were suspected of being gay, you were also suspected of being a communist. The federal government also mandated that the U.S. Postal Service keep track of the names and addresses of individuals in the community that these postal service workers thought was gay, and to turn those into the government. This was a very dangerous time for folks. And so our older adults spent much and many of their younger years living in the closet and being fearful of being out and sharing their true selves with people. It wasn't until the Stonewall Uprising where the LGBTQ community really took a stand and said, no more. We will not be treated this way. It was common practice before the Stonewall Uprising for law enforcement and other folks to verbally and physically abuse LGBTQ folks. In fact, during the Stonewall Rising, when police raided the bar, there were trans individuals who were strip searched and were sexually assaulted by law enforcement in the name of keeping the community safe. In the 1980s and 1990s, we had the HIV and AIDS epidemic, and there was a lack of support and resources and treatment that was not made available to LGBTQ folks. And there was a lot of stigma and misconceptions and lies that were spread about HIV and AIDS and the queer community. We also experienced lots of hate crimes before the passage of the Federal Hate Crimes Act, which wasn't passed until 2010. Matthew Shepard was a young college student who was brutally murdered by two individuals who had a history, documented history of being anti-gay. They decided to take him to a remote area, beat him until an inch of his life, and leave him tied to a fence in the middle of nowhere. He was found by a runner the next morning who literally thought he was a scarecrow. He was brought to the hospital and died a few days later. And it wasn't until 2010 that federal legislation was passed that said, if you attack someone, assault someone, commit a crime against someone out of hate for who they are, it is a crime, and you will get a more severe punishment because of that. There were also lots of discriminatory laws and practices. For example, being gay or being a lesbian was included as a mental disorder in the DSM and wasn't removed until the 1970s. We also had state laws that made it illegal for men to have sex. And Texas was the very last state to reverse that law, and that wasn't until 2006. And so two men in a loving, committed relationship who were having sex in Texas prior to 2006 were technically engaged in illegal activity. Even more today, we are seeing so many anti-trans policies being put into place and being recommended, including preventing people from using the bathroom that matches their gender identity. What we do know is that folks are more likely to be hurt in a bathroom by someone who is not trans than someone who is trans. And in fact, if we make trans people go to a bathroom that coincides with whatever genitalia that they have, we know that we are putting them at risk for harm. We're also seeing issues where folks are trying to pass legislation and make it difficult for youth to access care, to help them to be who they truly are. It is healthcare best practice to have folks and their family members and their healthcare providers make the best decisions for themselves about their healthcare. At this point, unfortunately, there's lots of hateful policies where it's the government that is trying to make those decisions. And so as much as we have come so far and we have marriage equality now, and we have the reversal of don't ask, don't tell, and we have DEI programs and inclusivity, we are still facing challenges and barriers every day. And I say all of this because for many of our older folks who have experienced all of these things, not just present day, the fear is very, very real for them because they have been bullied as they were kids. They were physically assaulted when they were going to gay clubs in their teens and in their 20s, not only by other people, but by law enforcement. And for those who might have had the opportunity to get married after marriage equality passed, and those who are living out and comfortably are now experiencing a lot of fear as to what may come. And is there going to be additional violence or pushback against the LGBTQ community? So other specific challenges that is backed up by data is we know that LGBTQ older folks have higher rates of poverty, food insecurity, disability, and mental health concerns. And they also have a higher likelihood of isolation. Many lack family and friends who can provide care. Many older adults never had biological children of their own, so they may not have anyone to take care of them when they're in need. They may have a lack of social networks or social circles, and many of them feel fear from other people, fear of being verbally abused, fear of being physically harmed because of their identity. And they're also really fearful of being treated differently. For so many of them, when they were younger, keeping their identity a secret was second nature to them. Now, when they go to see a healthcare provider and that healthcare provider asks them how they identify or who they are sexually attracted to, they may be reluctant or fearful to tell that provider, thinking that maybe that provider will look at them differently, treat them differently, or not provide the care that they need. And these are some statistics to kind of back up some of that data. Heterosexual couples or heterosexual older adults compared to our LGBTQ older adults. 2 out of 10 heterosexual older adults don't have children compared to 9 out of 10 LGBTQ older adults. And then same thing with those who live alone. 3 out of 10 heterosexual older adults live alone compared to 7 out of 10. So the data documents and shows that these are issues that they are facing. And finally, 1 out of 5 LGBTQ adults surveyed for this data collection cited a fear of double discrimination, both discrimination because they are older and being LGBTQ. Because regardless of your identity, we know that our older adults experience ageism. They are looked at as weaker, as less than, as not as smart as, and as needing help and care. When that's not really the case anymore. We have older adults who are running marathons, who are winning weightlifting championships, who are running their own business. And so this kind of concept or idea that the older you are, the weaker you are, we're looking to turn around, especially as our baby boomer population continues to age. And they are ones who have had more access to physical fitness activities, the internet, social media. And so they are more active in our community than any other previous older adult generation. The other thing to keep in mind is not all states have laws that protect LGBTQ folks. In fact, there's 41 states that do not currently have any housing or public accommodation laws prohibiting discrimination against people based on their sexual orientation. And so for those of us who live and work in Rhode Island, we have our worldview that is a Rhode Island worldview. And because the number of hate crimes is low, and because the number of reports of discrimination is low, and because we have laws and policies in place that prevent discrimination, unfortunately, it doesn't mean that other states have that as well. All of these challenges also lead to increased experiences of abuse by caregivers, by intimate partners, by children, by neighbors. And the reason why it happens more often is because our LGBTQ older adults are going to be less likely to report. They're going to be less likely to be identified by a provider, and it's going to be a lot easier for an abuser to manipulate them. For many people who might not be out or who are fearful of disclosing their identity, they're going to be really reluctant to report to a provider or to report to law enforcement that they're being abused at home. They also may be less likely to be identified by a provider. An older adult who might be widowed, maybe that provider isn't asking them about violence in the home because they're making an assumption that this person is single or is widowed or is living alone, or because this person is gay or a lesbian and not in a relationship, they don't ask the question. But what we know is that that is even more of a reason to ask the question. And abusers know that, and they will do whatever they can to manipulate the victim and to make them believe that they are alone, that no one will believe them, that they are going crazy. Here is our famous power and control wheel, which you all have seen in the introductory webinar that was recorded previously, but this is specifically relevant to the LGBTQ community. And you can see that many of the pieces of the power and control wheel are very similar to the dynamics of domestic violence that's experienced among heterosexual couples. We know that abusers use coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, denying, blaming, using children or other relationships, using their privilege, and economic abuse. But within all of that, there is also this idea that the norm is heterosexual couples, and that there is a fear by society, by providers, and by others of individuals who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans. When we talk about the power and control wheel within the older adult community, of folks who identify as LGBTQ, we may have an abuser that, say this is an individual who came out later in life. Maybe they were in a heterosexual relationship and had children. And then when their partner passed away, maybe they finally accepted their identity as being a lesbian or being gay and got into their first relationship. And maybe that person tries to control them a little bit, or exhibits jealous behaviors, or isolates this person. And the victim may be very reluctant to tell their family about what's going on or tell their friends or providers about what's going on because maybe they haven't come out to them yet. The other thing to keep in mind, especially for trans folks, is abusers will prevent them from getting access to the healthcare that they need. We've had abusers who have hidden hormone medications and other type of medications from individuals to prevent them from being their authentic selves. We have individuals who try to make victims feel like they're going crazy, where they'll purposely exploit memory issues and say things like, oh, well, you just must be losing your mind, or you just must be going crazy. Abusers may also try and prevent their victims from going out into the community and having those shared experiences with their community. Maybe they're preventing them from going to the local Pride Festival or the local LGBTQ senior lunch that Pride and Aging hosts once a month. The dynamics of abuse within an LGBTQ relationship are absolutely very, very similar to those in a heterosexual relationship, but keeping in mind that some of those unique nuances and barriers that our LGBTQ folks face, abusers will use to manipulate. And when we talk about all of the previous stats, that the overwhelming, more LGBTQ older adults are living in poverty, don't have access to safe housing, are living isolated, the economic abuse makes an even greater impact because their fixed income, if they have an abuser who is stealing their money or preventing them from getting what they need, then we are forcing folks to live in further isolation and in further poverty. Other fears that folks may express or may experience, and these are direct quotes from LGBTQ seniors that we've served at Pride in Aging. We had one trans member who was concerned, if I have to move into assisted living, or if I have to have a caregiver or hire a caretaker to come to my house, I'm a trans woman, but I still have to shave every morning. Is this person going to be okay shaving me? Or are they going to be mean to me? Are they going to not want to shave me? We've had LGBTQ elders who have had to move into assisted living facilities or into smaller apartments or condos after living in their home and in their community for so long. And they're fearful, will my neighbors be accepting of me? And other residents at an assisted living. We know that when folks move into assisted living or move into a nursing home after leaving their home and their community, it's already hard. But for many of our older LGBTQ adults, they're moving into an environment where they are moving in with the folks who used to bully them when they were kids. And so these are people who are nervous about uprooting their entire life, moving into a space that is mostly heterosexual and into a space where maybe some of these people are the ones who have caused harm to them in the past, or the LGBTQ older adult may assume that these people may not be accepting of them. At Pride in Aging, we do a lot of training and education for long-term care providers, assisted living and nursing home, not only professionals, but also residents, because we want to make sure that folks are safe and feel welcome wherever they decide to age in the community. And we've had elder LGBTQ folks who have experienced bullying and being made fun of by other residents and by staff. And so providing this training will help to create even safer environments at some of our community-based living. But regardless of all of those fears, all of these previous discriminatory practices, all of the previous kind of experiences that our LGBTQ folks and older adults have experienced has also built a lot of resiliency. And so many of them have built skills and abilities to help them live independently and successfully, regardless of the challenges that have been thrown their way. So we also don't want to assume that older LGBTQ folks are weak or need our help or are fearful or are experiencing discrimination, because they may not be, and they may have dealt with it themselves, and they may have developed a way to overcome these challenges that we're not even aware of. And so we also have to trust that they know what's best for themselves. So facing discrimination by providers, by police officers, by hospital staff, by APS workers, by clinicians, by anyone who's going to be providing services or interacting with this LGBTQ senior. These are very valid. And so how you can combat them is to show up in a caring and respectful way. Some of the things that you can do is introduce yourself. And when you introduce yourself, hi, my name is Sarah. I'm going to be your advocate today. I use the pronouns she and her. What's your name and what pronouns do you use? Just opening a conversation like that sends the message that you are a safe person and that you are welcoming and inclusive. Maybe you want to ask them and not use gendered specific language. And so if you're doing an intake with someone or trying to find out additional information, when you ask them, are you married? Maybe you want to say, Do you have a partner? Or are you in a relationship? So that way it opens the door and allows them to define and describe their relationship or how they identify in their own way. In your intake forms or any paperwork that folks need to fill out, having an opportunity for folks to not only check off their gender as male or female, but also other or non-binary, having additional options on your intake form. When you're asking for spouse's information, maybe you want to put instead of spouse, close person or personal relationship or emergency contact information. We want to stay away from language that genders people, that forces people into a heterosexual box and forces them into our stereotypical ideals about marriage and who folks should be with. And at the end of the day, we want folks, regardless of how they identify, to be treated with dignity and respect. And so when I do trainings like this, I always encourage people to think about if it was your loved one, someone that you cared about, a friend, a family member, sister, daughter, father, brother, whoever, how would you want them to be treated by a professional? And that's how you should treat the people that you're interacting with. So you want to establish trust and rapport with individuals. You want to normalize validating, normalize what they're saying and validate what they're saying. If someone says that they have multiple sex partners, you probably don't want to have a shocked face. You want to keep a neutral face, and make sure that you are asking questions that's going to help you collect the information that you need without alienating this person either. If you're noticing that someone might be having difficulty explaining a relationship or describing how they identify, it's okay to ask questions or to say to them, I've gone through training on LGBTQ issues. There's nothing that you're going to say to me that is going to shock me. We want to make sure that we are providing the best care that addresses all of your needs. Or phrasing your intake at the beginning by saying, I'm going to be asking a lot of different questions. It's not because I'm nosy, it's because I want to make sure that I have all the accurate information about you and your needs. And if you're not sure about something, ask. If someone keeps using the word partner and you don't know what that is, you can say, and when you say partner, who is that? Or can you tell me more? How do you describe partner, or how do you define partner? And the other thing is, we're not perfect and we're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. When folks, especially, are transitioning from one gender identity to another, you may mess up and you may refer to them as their old name or their old or dead pronouns, as we call it. If you do that, just say, I'm really sorry. When someone is transitioning, maybe their legal documents haven't been updated yet. They present as female and they identify as female, but maybe their legal documents still have their male name and their gender marked as male. And if you make a mistake and call them by that old or dead name or their dead pronouns, just say, I'm really sorry, and correct yourself. Use their proper name, use their proper pronouns, and move forward. If you make a huge deal about it and you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I did that, it actually causes a little bit more embarrassment to that person. Our LGBTQ folks know that some of these terms and some of these things might be new for some people. So just apologize and move on and keep going with the conversation. You don't need to make a big deal about it. But acknowledging and apologizing is really important because it sends the message that you know you made a mistake and you're going to be better and continue to make sure that this person feels safe in their identity, regardless of the mistake that you made. You want to use affirming language. You want to recognize their chosen family, especially for our older adults. Many of them, their close friends and family members may be starting to pass away, or for many of them, they lost them due to AIDS and the HIV epidemic. And so chosen family are the individuals that we select to have in our lives, who we may consider our brothers and our sisters and our best friends. And for some of our older adults who weren't accepted by their family members when they first came out, they may not have biological family in their life anymore. And so if someone is in a nursing home, or if you need to interview someone and they say, oh, well, my best friend, can they be with me? Normally you may say, well, no, maybe your spouse can be with you or your daughter, but maybe their best friend is the closest person that they have in their life. So try to be accommodating as much as possible. Address potential discrimination. Make sure that your staff is trained. Make sure you have policies in place to address discrimination, and make sure that in your policies and protocols that you're sharing with your clients, they know that if they experience discrimination, that there is a standard of practice and a way to report that, and that they feel confident that you'll address it. Making sure you're respecting the individual rights of folks, and making sure that you are referring them to culturally competent services and connections that will fit their needs. So how can you send the message that you're a safe person? It's more than just putting a pride flag in the window or just putting your pronouns in your signature on your email. It's about receiving training, education, and information needed to be a welcoming and safe environment. And also making sure that how you and your organization present yourself and itself into the community, that it is welcoming and that it is inclusive. So maybe on your badge, you have your pronouns. Maybe you have specific policies and protocols that address how your staff gets trained on LGBTQ issues. And if you're in a nursing home or assisted living, how the residents are getting trained on these issues. Making sure that you have policies in place that address cases of discrimination, making sure you have a list of resources and information that is relevant to older LGBTQ folks. Making sure that your marketing materials are inclusive and do not just have white heterosexual representation, but that there's diverse representation. So when folks look at your brochures, look at your website, look at any of the information that you're putting out there, they can see themselves, because folks are going to be more likely to connect with organizations where they see themselves. And maybe you want to make sure that your environment that you're working out of is inclusive, has decor that is warm and welcoming for older adults, and also representative of the fact that you are inclusive and understanding of LGBTQ issues. And there's lots of resources that are available to support individuals who identify as LGBTQ. Pride in Aging, which is the organization that I work with, has been in existence since 1995, and we provide socialization activities, advocacy, and education on LGBTQ issues. We host an in-person monthly virtual gathering and a monthly in-person lunch gathering. We hold quarterly events and socialization activities, and we do a lot of training and education for all different types of professionals, similar to this, to make sure that our professionals in Rhode Island are prepared to respond to the needs of LGBTQ older adults. The Village Common of Rhode Island also has a Pride Circle specifically for LGBTQ older adults. There's also other organizations organizing in the state to help advance the rights of older LGBTQ folks, including Older Lesbians Organizing for Change, or OLOC. There's the Wonderground Lesbian Library, which collects and hosts exhibits of historical LGBTQ artifacts. And the Aldersbridge community is going to be opening the state's first housing community for older LGBTQ folks. So there are lots of resources out there. And if you ever have questions, need additional information, please always feel free to reach out to Pride in Aging or any of these resources. Here's our contact information. We offer training and education for a diverse range of professionals, and we're also available to troubleshoot and provide information to you. So please feel free to email us, check out our website, and just know that you being understanding and welcoming to LGBTQ folks could actually be life-saving, because if you are not welcoming, if you discriminate, if you don't treat this person with respect, they are less likely to come forward and to seek help and seek support. But when you validate them, when you show representation and inclusivity, they're not only more likely to reach out for help, but they're more likely to stay engaged and to do what needs to be done to keep themselves safe and healthy. So thank you very much for the opportunity to provide this webinar. Best of luck in all of the work that you're doing. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us at info@prideandagingri.org. Thank you.